And joining us today in our book talk segment, great to welcome him, has written a very fascinating book, very timely as well. It's called The Secret Origins of the Drone Revolution. It's called Predator. We're joined today by Richard Whittle from up in, I believe, in Maryland today. And Richard, good to have a chance to chat with you for a few minutes. How are you?
Yeah, I'm living the dream, Doug, and glad to be on your show. Thanks.
Not to state the obvious, but this is a timely topic, especially what's gone on the last couple of days militarily with the U.S., but this really deals with how the drones were kind of put together. I guess a lot of people, have heard the drones, but they don't know the origins of it. So interesting topic to write about.
Right, and that's exactly what set me off on the path to write this book 5 years ago. I wanted to know where all these drones came from, and I very quickly discovered, I set out to write a book. I thought a book about an airplane, and I ended up writing a book about war, and a book about the Air Force, and a book about the CIA. Because the Predator drone, which is the drone that changed the world, is the first drone that was used for targeted killings by the United States, and it's the first drone that was rigged to be flown by remote control over the other side of the planet. And it's the aircraft that opened the door to the drone revolution we see unfolding around us today. And I found the story fascinating myself.
Yeah, when you look at it, and I guess like a lot of inventions, if you want to call it that, a couple of people can kind of come up with the idea, and I guess one out of a garage, right, in L.A.
Yeah, Doug. I mean, it's I actually the book takes the story from the story of a man named Abraham Karam, a former Israeli aeronautical engineer. Most people think he was a genius, who immigrated to the United States, and like all great American inventors, went to work in his garage in Los Angeles and came up with a new kind of drone. And then I take the story through the Air Force getting control of the drone called the Predator that was based on his designs, and arming it and using it on behalf of the CIA and for the military in Afghanistan when the war began there October 7, 2001.
And initially, if I read the book correctly, I guess the military, or at least the political end, was kind of reticent to even use this, right? I mean, they didn't really pay attention to this,
Doug, drones had been a sort of a niche technology forever in the military. I mean, the military started trying to build useful unmanned aircraft back in World War I. They had these little biplanes about the size of a go-kart called the Kettering Bug, and that was supposed to be an aerial torpedo. And then we had target drones, that were used to train anti-aircraft gunners back in the World War II era and beyond. And in Vietnam, we had jet-powered drones called Firebees and Fireflies, but they never caught on as a major technology until Abe Karam's design of what's called an endurance unmanned aerial vehicle, a bird that can fly for 24 to 40 hours. Stay up in the sky with a camera and with other sensors attached to it to provide a view of the battlefield, stream live video back to commanders, and then ultimately was armed by the Air Force. And that was when things changed. It was actually kind of like the first personal computers. How if you remember, when they first came out, you could set them on your desk and you could look at it, and it was nice to type into them, but what else could you do with it? It wasn't clear to a lot of people how useful this technology was. And former Air Force Secretary Whit Peters, who I interviewed for this book, pointed out to me, and my book documents it, that the Predator was like the personal computer. Other people beyond the inventor came up with innovations in software and hardware and communications architecture that turned the personal computer from a novelty into a necessity. And that's exactly what happened with the Predator.
I guess the biggest obstacle you talk about in the book is the technology to be able to send back the data from the plane to the person flying it thousands of miles away, particularly where you can do the commands quickly enough where it would read it, right? I mean, that was one of the big issues.
Right, and the fascinating part of that story to me, Doug, is that it wasn't the sort of military-industrial complex per se that said, oh, we ought to be able to fly a drone on the other side of the planet. What happened was Richard Clark, who was the chief counterterrorism advisor on the National Security Council staff, and a man named Charlie Allen, who was a senior CIA official in the year 2000, were pushing the idea that the United States should kill Osama bin Laden before he killed more Americans. And so they, at the suggestion of an Air Force general, pushed the CIA and the Air Force to send an unarmed predator over Afghanistan to look for Osama bin Laden, and therein lay the first major communications development, because to do that, they couldn't put the usual ground control station and satellite Earth terminals close enough to Afghanistan to be able to fly within the usual 500-mile radius that they were used to. They had to move the ground control station someplace inconspicuous. So a very brilliant scientist working for a secretive Air Force unit called Big Safari came up with a system that allowed them to put the ground control station at Ramstein Air Base in Germany and let the Predator take off from a rugged little airfield in Uzbekistan and fly over Afghanistan. And they found Osama bin Laden with that Predator in September of 2000, the story I tell in the book. And then just to continue the story a touch, the next communications development done by that same techno-scientist, as I call him, who worked for Big Safari, it came in 2001 when the idea of using the Predator, which was then being armed by Big Safari with Hellfire missiles, the idea of sending it to kill Osama bin Laden gained momentum within the government. And they decided they couldn't pull the trigger on German soil, and so they had to move the ground control station to the United States. Almost no one who was in on the project thought that was possible, except for this techno-scientist who came up with the idea that you could send the signal by fiber optic cable from the United States to Germany, and from there up to a satellite that would be able to reach the drone over Afghanistan. And they put the ground control station on the parking lot of the CIA between the water tower and the daycare center, painted it white to make it look like a regular freight container, and parked a double-wide mobile home next to it for the Air Force to use as a command center. And that's where the operation was run. That's where armed predators were flown from in the early days of the war in Afghanistan.
I know we have limited time today, but we'll kind of wrap up on this question. How much do you see this becoming, perhaps, percentage-wise, what the U.S. uses as their Air Force? It's always going to be, I guess, people involved too, but will this continue to grow?
Yeah, well, it'll continue to grow, I think. But as you see from the operations going on in Syria, where most of the weaponry that's been used has been dropped from manned aircraft, or fired Tomahawk missiles fired from ships. The powerful thing that the Endurance drone does for the military is not so much the load of weapons it carries. I mean, the Predator only carries 2 little Hellfire missiles that have 20-pound warheads. One of the commanders, actually, who was in the ground control station at the CIA, told me, look, those are 2 little silver bullets. I can use those in the first 10 minutes of a mission that may last 20 hours. The powerful thing is that eye in the sky, that ability to show commanders what's happening on the battlefield, that ability to direct other aircraft, manned aircraft, to targets. I think that's the way they're being used over in Syria now.
Fascinating topic, fascinating book called Predator, The Secret Origins of the Drone Revolution. We've been talking with Richard Whittle today. And Richard, do you have a website you want to give out?
Yes, a beautiful website created by my publisher called richardwhittle.net. Whittle is W-H-I-T-T-L-E, and that's one word, richardwhittle.net. And in addition to finding good information about the book and photographs and a button where you can buy the book if you'd like, there are interesting videos on that website that show the Predator test shots, missile test shots, as Big Safari was arming it in 2001, and a couple of actual shots of combat footage of Predator Hellfire shots. So I think people will find it interesting.
Well, Richard, appreciate you taking a few minutes today. Good luck with the book, and we'll hopefully talk to you again down the road. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Doug.